So, Father, thank you for the Shabbat from yesterday. Thank you for this family group, and keep everybody safe. Seems like things are starting to change pretty quickly in this. Whatever you have planned, just let it happen. Expose it all. In whose name I pray. And with that, I'm going to shut it off. See you soon.
All right. Thanks. So I looked up on the internet, just Googled the word Alef-Tav to see what would come up. There's only a few things. What some people say, they're just describing what Alef-Tav is. It's a word that's not, they say it's never translated, but that's not exactly true. In that, if you look in Klein's dictionary, the word spelled Alef-Tav, which is the first letter and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, kind of like saying A and Z, or alpha and omega. That would be English and Greek. But, or Aleph, or alpha, A and Z is the Canadian way of saying the last letter, Z. They'll say it means with, or that somehow it's a plowshare or a yoke, or that you would yoke together two animals, two oxen or two horses to pull a plowshare, you might say. So it's the concept of being engaged together. So when Alef-Tav is used as a hyphenated prefix to a word, it joins the action of the verb to a specific noun, kind of the yoked plowshare concept. So you'll see Alef-Tav as a prefix to some other letters, Alef-Tav Mem, Alef-Tav Kaf, Alef-Tav Hey. Alef-Tav Hey, for example, is simply translated you, Y-O-U. Alef-Tav Kaf Mem would be y'all, plural you. Alef-Tav Mem would be perhaps with them. The other form of the Alef-Tav is what they call a standalone Alef-Tav. So Bill Sanford published a book called the MATS, Messianic Alef-Tav Scriptures. Probably almost 20 years ago, he came up with that, and he is saying or suggesting that the Alef-Tav is the signature of YAHSHUAH. So I think I believe, I might be wrong about that, but I think he presents as a premise in the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 1, verse 18, I think it is, or there's two places, that YAHSHUAH appearing to John the Revelator says, I am the Aleph and the Tav, or Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Now that's also a phrase that YAHUAH used regarding himself. I was going to look it up. I forget where it is. Maybe somebody can find it. I think it's maybe in Isaiah. But because it's used in Revelation, where YAHSHUAH claims to be the first and the last, beginning and the end, that equates him, gives him equivalency with the Father. That's a key phrase that a lot of people consider, which is part of another conversation, which we've talked a little bit about. Maybe we could talk about that some other time. But the point is, just giving reference is to him saying, I am the, if he's not speaking Greek or English, but he's speaking Hebrew, he'd say, I am the Alef-Tav. So for this standalone Alef-Tav that appears in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, fourth of 7 words, if that's his identifying insignia, signature, or a stamp of reference that says, oh, that's him, that's his secret hidden identity. I've heard it said that the rabbis, the sages, the scholars don't know why there are these standalone Alef-Tavs. Now, again, if it's a hyphenated Alef-Tav, it's a grammatical device which is not translated, which is connecting a verb action to a very specific noun. That's so when it says Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elohim, that would be translated in the beginning, created Elohim. So in Hebrew, they swap the verb and the noun compared to English. English would say, God created, but here it's bara Elohim. So Elohim would be translated God. Bara is the word for create. It's opposite, similar to Spanish. And then there's this word Alef-Tav, standing all by itself. And then Hashemayim, translated the heavens, Va'et, that's and Alef-Tav, hyphenated Haaretz, the earth. So Va'et hyphen the earth is not the same as the standalone. Va, which is just the simple letter Vav by itself, translated and. So the question is, why do you find these various Alef-Tav standalone scattered, peppered throughout the scripture? One suggestion, as I said, that Bill Sanford said, well, that's Yeshua's signature. Okay, possibly. Now, there's also the Et Sefer, spelled with a C, Alef-Tav, C-E-P-H-E-R. Et Sefer is the Dr. Pidgeon's publication where he went and put in all the Alef-Tavs. So Bill Sanford had put in all the Alef-Tavs as well, the MATS, Messianic Alef-Tav Scripture, and he had highlighted wherever the letters Aleph and Tav appear in a word. And Mark Gravel, who's a participant in most of our calls here, has also, in his studies, highlighted words that have both the Aleph and Tav in them. So the question is, does that really mean anything? Or if so, what does it mean? So the concept that Aleph is an ox, the word Aleph means ox, and if you look in the dictionary, the word Aleph also means to be taught, trained, and domesticated, or of the house, which is to be domesticated. Well, oxen are not domesticated animals that are of the house. A dog or a cat maybe, but not an ox. But an ox has the mind that's more easily, you might say, amiable to human association than most other animals. That's, in that sense, domesticated. And a tav is literally a mark or a sign. And I've heard it said that what farmers have done over the centuries, the way that the mind of the ox works is that it'll fixate on a certain mark, sign, target in the distance. And when you yoke up this ox, it'll pull straight towards that mark that you set out, and it'll pull a straight line of a furrow for the plow. Whereas if you have some other animal, a donkey or horse, it'll perhaps be more meandering and wandering. So the idea that you have this head in a yoke pulling at a target, well, the head of the ox is almost the same as this triangular, like our letter A, arrowhead shape. And if you take an arrow in a bow and you shoot it, it's going to shoot this straight line towards the target. So the Alef-Tav as a concept is the arrow and the target. But the arrow and the target is in the Bet Gimel realm. And when I say that, the arrowhead is an object, okay, but it's shaped like an Aleph, but what is the Aleph? The Aleph is the one silent letter. So it's by default typically pronounced as the eh sound. So, for example, the publication of Et Sefer, they call it eth, E-T-H, because the Tav, some people pronounce as a T, some as a T-H, and some people as an S. So I believe it's the Ashkenazi Jews will call Shabbat, instead of a B for the bet and a T for the Tav, they'll pronounce the bet as a V and the Tav as an S. So they'll call it Shabbos. And I'm just giving people information. People may be new to this call. We're discussing how to analyze the language, the spelling of words. So you'll see in Stone's Tanakh that it's an Ashkenazi publication, meaning that the Tavs are written with an S as a transliteration. And the letter bet typically with a V sound. And it's like, does anybody know the way it was really pronounced back in King David's era? I've heard that the answer is no. Nobody really knows. But yet I've heard other people say, oh, come on. The Jews who speak this language, have retained this language, have kept sacred, have kept pure the expression of every word, the language. So somebody had asked in one of the comments a couple weeks ago, hey, what about grammatical syntax? Or what about grammar structure? Nobody really knows. What it has become now, based on some, let's say, the resolutions, people resolved to say, hey, let's lock this in back in the Middle Ages. And so there was some scribes that are called the Masoretic scribes. Okay, and they said, instead of this being all verbal, handed down from generation to generation, let's just lock it in and make some rules, some grammar, syntax, structure of the language, and that's what it become. But whether they locked it in with vowel points for certain expressions that were accurate, or that just that's what they wanted us to think it was, or from now on that's what it is, nobody knows. It just is what it is. But for us to then look back at the Paleo and say, well, was there more yods and vavs stuck in that the Masoretic scribes took out yods and vavs and added vowel points? That's what Jeff Benner says. That's what the if you go to erictology.net or website, you'll see that the Paleo scriptures are there all the way from Genesis to Revelation, some version of it, and that James Relf, who had done a lot of work on that, had used Jeff Benner's structure, so there's a different spelling of a lot of words. So if you look at Stone's Tanakh and say, well, how's this word really spelled? We addressed this once before, a couple weeks ago, that if you are trying to do equidistant letter sequencing, if you add extra yods and vavs, it's going to come out completely different. So where's the reality? Nobody knows. But we're looking at the spelling of the words, and what I'm saying is that if you know the meaning of the 22 letters, that's where the reality is. The 22-letter Hebrew alphabet. Some people have suggested, I think Jeff Benner said that there was a second letter, Gayan, shaped like kind of a knotted rope. So it's not just the eyeball, but there's this 23rd letter. I don't think that that's a legitimate letter, but that's a matter of debate, you could say, because Psalms 119, Proverbs 31, and numerous other places don't have a 23rd letter. Going back to David. Why David? Well, if you go back to the Tower of Babel, it doesn't tell us what the original language was, but Elohim scrambled all the other languages, and then the people associated with each other based on the language, and then they moved to different places in the world because of their language. So Elohim had decided, apparently, YAHSHUAH, who was going to speak what language, and then they'd find those people that are speaking that language, and then they'd migrate to elsewhere. He separated the people according to their language. And I believe that Hebrew previously existed, the Tower of Babel, and he kept Hebrew uniquely by itself. Shafah, Shin Pei He, or Shin Pei Tav is the word for lip language tongue regarding Hebrew. That same word also means to sweep bare or clean, like the edge of a bank of a river or a lake where nothing is growing, or a bald head, and top of a mountain which is windswept above the timberline, you might say. And it also means to cure from lunacy and restore to health. So because the same word spelled Shin Pei He and Shin Pei Tav means that, I personally then appropriate the association to say you speak Hebrew and it'll do something about restoring your sanity, curing from lunacy. So part of this study is to look at the meaning of the words and look at all the meanings of words, regardless of the vowel points, regardless of the articulation, and say it's all fair game, you might say, to associate the various translated words with shuffled spelling, meaning add yods or vavs, take them away, different prefixes, different suffixes, that take the second letter and duplicate it, make it the third, or sometimes they'll take the 2 letters, add a vav, and make it 3 letters as a secondary. It's all the structure of the engineering of the language, and that you can still see the meaning of the words if you do that. So that's the basis of the analysis of all this. And I'm saying that to show you something in Psalms 81, which we're going to talk about here. But just to say then, what is Alef-Tav? If you look at the word spelled Alef-Vav-Tav, now you're just randomly sticking a vav in between the aleph and the tav. Like if Alef-Tav's never translated, then why can you find a word if you that might mean with, or you, Y-O-U, if you add a hey after the Alef-Tav. So the fact that it's never translated is not exactly 100% question, but the standalone Alef-Tav is not translated. Never appeared in English as any meaning. But if you stick a vav in between aleph and tav, it means it would be pronounced as oath. And so what it means is an agreement. Like you swear an oath that you will do something. It's a type of contract. If you are going to have somebody work on your car or work on your house or go to a doctor, you say, okay, I'll do this kind of work and I'll pay you this kind of money, and this is what you're going to do and this is what you're not going to do. That's an oath. But it's also a sign or a symbol. Well, a musical note is a sign or a symbol, so that's an Alef-Vav-Tav. And in the Red Klein's dictionary, it says it's also a letter of the alphabet. So if you just take that as its own statement, an Alef-Vav-Tav is a letter of the alphabet because it's a sign or a symbol. Now, some people will say it's only a sign or a symbol of a phonetic sound. So we mentioned before how Miles Jones wrote this book called The Writing of God, and he insists emphatically that because Elohim said, do not make any graven images, if the symbols of the alphabet, the letters, meant anything, then when he wrote with his finger on the tables of stone, he would be making engraved images. And he wouldn't do that because the 10 Commandments say don't do that. So by writing with his finger on the tables of stone, that act eradicated the Paleo-Hebrew orthography, shape of the letters, from any meaning and retained only the pronunciation aspect. I absolutely, totally disagree. But now that's my mind compared to his mind. And he has a bunch of guys that agree with him that gave credit to him on his book cover. You'll see like 20 different people say what a great book it is. And it's like, well, he has some interesting ideas, but I don't think it's such a great idea, this aspect. So now you have to make up your own mind. But Alef-Vav-Tav, just so you know, means a letter of the alphabet, a sign, a symbol, an oath, an agreement. So I choose to wrap all that together and say, okay, every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a picture that means something regarding the oath of agreement between Israel and YAHSHUAH, Zavot, the Elohim of Israel. Now, I could point to other Bible verses that bring that same concept out, but just simply right there, the spelling of the word Alef-Vav-Tav is enough to say that. That's one place to get that perspective. The word spelled Alef-Yod-Tav literally in the dictionary means to spell words. Well, how do you spell words? With letters. So Alef-Yod-Tav is the idea of spelling words, and Alef-Vav-Tav is the letters that you use to do the spelling. And what is the whole concept of what you're spelling? Communication. Communication is what's in the mind or the heart of this one person. How does it transfer exactly without any misunderstanding to the mind and heart of that person so that they can come in agreement? And if two people think they're talking about the same thing, but they each have a different idea, that's where you get lawsuits. Because somebody said, this is what you said you do. No, it isn't. That's not what I'm going to do at all. Well, that's what you said. No. So that's where you write down. And so I believe that Elohim created humanity to have the same type of mind so that we can communicate with exactly the same understanding, even if we're from different cultures through different times and different eras and different languages. Human mind and heart works the same. He kept that uniform, and it's all structured on the fact that he wants to be able to have a relationship with us, all of us individual humans, and keep that stable, solid, real. So all this stuff is not whimsical. Before sometime in the 1800s, this wasn't necessarily an idea. And so they thought, boy, this person's just nuts. This person's just crazy. Lock them up in an asylum or something. And when psychology as a science became formulated, it wasn't until after the days of like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud and I think B.F. Skinner, behavioralism. And anyway, psychology became a science that could be studied, ordered, and determined that, guess what? Everybody thinks the same way. And you can train people to behave the same way. As a matter of fact, you can train rats in a cage to press a bar to get some food, and that they found that if you give a random positive or negative reinforcement, that's the best way to train them to press that bar. A random schedule of reward. Well, that was developed during the early, you might say, mid 20th century, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. They were really developing psychology, and we're only just now at a place where the overlords of the world, the WHO? Yeah, the overlords of the world, the WHO, the people that have just claimed that by April, May, maybe March, they want to have more power to incarcerate, to crunch our brains and hearts. Yeah, they've got big plans for this year. The WHO? Depending on what news sources you listen to. But they're now exercising what they have discovered, scientists, about the human essence, psychologically, sociologically, how to influence with media and voice. Just so you know, that's what's going on. Well, YAHSHUAH is the guy that designed all this, and he's already figured out, because he built us to respond to, for example, this one word we're going to look at that means warning, and it's ayin vav dalet. It means warning, but it also means repeatedly and forcefully. So if you have a flashing light, bump, 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 that flashing light literally is repetition. Repeatedly, forcefully is the word for warning. Well, there's this word, I think it's in Isaiah 28 that we're going to get to, spelled ayin yod dalet, and it's not in the dictionary. Well, it is, but it's an idolatrous festival. What's an idolatrous festival got to do with the subject? You don't know, because it has nothing to do with that. But then they'll say in the footnote, Klein says, well, it's something that's recurring every year. So every year an idolatrous festival comes around. Well, every week has a Monday and a Tuesday. So is that ayin yod dalet? It's something that recurs. Well, ayin vav dalet is a warning, and it means repeatedly and forcefully. So if you have this flashing light as a warning caution, it affects the mind. So one reason for going over Yahweh's stuff repeatedly is because that's the way we're designed to be impacted. And so when you have certain media doing the same thing with little bits of information, just like a blinking light, doesn't have to be a sledgehammer, just a constant messaging, it has an effect. Okay, so knowing that, to go over Yahweh's words repeatedly will have an effect on your inner psyche. So even though we've gone over some of these things before, to keep going over what Yahweh said, as a reminder, as an encouragement, as a stabilizer. That's just the way we're built. As a matter of fact, the word lamed, which is the 12th letter, shaped like a, you might say the letter J or a shepherd's hook, literally, well, it could even be like a rudder, if you, depending on the aspect that you hold it at, the rudder behind a ship. It means teach and learn, but it also means repetition. So again, he has built us to require repetition to teach and learn. People that study the brain, the neural synapses, dendrites, and all inside the cerebrum of the brain, if you do something for 20 minutes, the firing of this from one neural to the next becomes locked in and forms a permanent structure. But after, I think the term that they've found is 7 years, if it's not used, it'll decay. So the way the brain is built, the human brain is that if you do something once, the neurons that form that connection inside you just, they join together, they allow that to happen, and then they'll go back to where they were. And if you keep doing it, they'll stay there, but then they'll go back. But if you keep doing it for 20 minutes, they'll form a permanent structure. So when you practice something, practice music, practice playing tennis, whatever it is, do it for more than 20 minutes. And if you have a certain way of thinking, keep or retain that system in your mind on a particular subject for more than 20 minutes. And you'll restructure your physiology, the actual physical configuration of your nerve cells in your brain will be different after 20 minutes. And if you keep it up, like I said, it restructures for 7 years and then it kind of falls away. But if you keep it up, you will be a different person. Okay, so what has that got to do with Alef-Tav? Well, if you look at Aleph as the first letter and Tav as the last letter, it's kind of like the covers of a book. Well, what's in between all the other letters? So is it Alef-Tav just first and last, beginning and the end, or is it saying in a cryptic sort of hidden messaging way that it's everything contained from Aleph to Tav? Well, the word ruach, resh vav chet, in the dictionary means not just spirit or mind, but it's also will, disposition, to have an intention. It's to have something within you, but it also means wind, air, ventilate, and expanse. So if you open the window and let the air breathe in and out, that's the word ruach. The Columbia River Gorge here between Oregon and Washington, Hood River is the windsurfing capital of the world, they say, because the way the mountains and the river and the air temperatures, the wind just blows right down through this canyon. There's a winery there, and I think they called a wine RUAH, ruach. Well, that's essentially the word ruach, which is wind. The wind itself, but for the wind to blow from the desert through the canyon, through the gorge, the Columbia River Gorge, down to the Portland, Vancouver area where things open up again, that whole expanse is the ruach. So if you think about that, then the expanse between Aleph and Tav is ruach. Well, that's 22 letters. The word kadosh or kadesh, which is spelled kuf dalet shin, then you could put different yods and vavs to pronounce it differently with slightly different meanings, is translated holy, sacred, sanctified, set apart, betrothed, special, this very unique. Only from Elohim is kadosh. Only unto Elohim is kadosh, or kadush, because the vav is pronounced as either an O, a U, a V, or a W. And some people say, look, at the V sound and the O sound were late additions. I don't know whether it's late addition or not. Nobody knows for sure, but you'll see there's this one fellow by the name of Prince David Awakening to Greatness, I think it is. He has a lot of music, and he's an interesting guy on the internet. Very much dedicated to YAHSHUAH and his Torah. And he uses the word kadosh. And when you hear that, it's like, gosh, that's kind of, well, it's like, what are we used to? Is it kadosh? Is it kiddush? Is it kadash? Is it kadosh? Whatever. I'm not going to scrutinize that phonetic vowel detail. Just so you know, you hear the different things, and we're trying to come back to the language. And I'm saying that for a reason. We'll get to that by the end of this. But the idea that only what is of Elohim is kadosh. Everything else is of humanity. But if it's directly from Elohim, in its pure essence, it's kadosh, it's kiddush. So the Ruach HaKodesh is his spirit, heart, mind, disposition, attitude, intention, purpose. What he's about is the Ruach HaKodesh. So to say, well, the Ruach HaKodesh, that's translated Holy Spirit. So that's the third person of the Trinity. Not necessarily. The Ruach HaKodesh is the Kadosh, heart, mind, will, intention from Alef-Tav. That's the 22-letter gamut chronological sequence that he predetermined, as we've talked about before, referenced by John 1:1. In the beginning was the word, Hadabar, the thing that he then amered, Aleph Memresh, Dalet Bet Resh is word, matter, thing, but it's also stipulations, and everything he ever told his people, everything he ever told humanity was constructed of the elements of the 22-letter Hebrew alphabet. So similar to the periodic table of elements of chemistry, the 22 Hebrew letters in sequence order, chronological arrangement, is the word of John 1:1, which became flesh that we called the man named Yod-Heh-Vav Shin Ayin, YAHSHUAH, or YAHSHUAH, or that's another matter. But the point is, that name using 5 of the letters is the anthropomorphizing the human being of the 22 letters. In the 22 letters, in the first verse of John 1:1 says, is with Elohim and is Elohim. What does that mean? How can a word be him who invented the word? He's more than the word. He invented 22 letters. He could have invented 22 million letters. He could have invented one letter. He could have invented whatever. What do you mean? So obviously I'm saying that for anybody to say, oh, our Elohim is that man, is inappropriate. For anybody to say our Elohim is the universe is also inappropriate, because the universe is just one little speck of what could have been the totality of what he might have done, and he's so much bigger, beyond unfathomable, uncontainable. How can anybody say such a foolish, stupid thing that the universe is God, or the man there is God, or the alphabet is God? Nobody's saying that. But to say that his intention to build, design, invent a word with a scope of expanse between the beginning letter and the last letter, and everything it contains, everything it means, and like an archer shooting an arrow with the intention, so he builds an arrowhead shaped like an aleph, but the arrowhead is now an object, which is bet, and it flies in a straight line to the target that he also intended and set up. That's the Alef-Tav. So for him to say the verse, as I have planned, so shall it be. That's the inference of Aleph and Tav, the plan. He had this big idea, and he determined that it will be, how it will be, when it would be, and all the whys and wherefores of, if it's not yet, what's going to happen for it to be. That's Alef-Tav. He also said, as I have purposed, so shall it arise, or come about, or stand, depending on how you translate. So that's Alef-Tav. So then, is that, when you see the Alef-Tav, like Bill Sanford says, oh, that's a signature of Jesus Christ, or Yeshua HaMashiach, is that his signature? Man, what does that mean? But if you say, wait a minute, you have to understand the meaning of each of the 22 letters and understand that you can read the 22 letters in a sequence order and that it reads as a story, a narrative. That's Alef-Tav. So to understand that the guy who invented the Aleph to the Tav has an idea, has a purpose, has an intention, has a plan and an agenda that he will accomplish. And when he says the word that goes out of my mouth will not return to me void, it'll accomplish whatever I set it forth to do. The world can't end until what he planned and set in motion as an agenda is accomplished. It can't end because he's already decreed that. That concept is the Alef-Tav. So as we said last week or the week before, a billboard, literally a Zion, Zadi Yod Vav Nun, is a billboard. And if you are driving somewhere and you see a big sign telling you this is the town, this is the exit, oh, it tells you where you are in space. I mentioned that some people have suggested that time travel is possible, and whether or not it is a different matter. But how do you know what day you're at if you're somehow flying or zoning over time? Well, that's what crop circles are. They're put in place so that people know what day that was there so they can land. Just an idea. Whether or not it's real, it's just an idea. So if a crop circle is a marker of time and a billboard is a marker of space, what if we think of Alef-Tav as a marker of dimension? Meaning Yahuwah's Ruach HaKodesh, Yahuwah's perspective, his mind, his heart of the way this whole thing's going down. From the beginning to end, he's got it all planned out, and it includes the fact that he allows certain people to get full of themselves and pound their chest and roar like King Kong, but he's going to take them out according to what he said. He's done it with empires. He's done it with people. He's done it with giants and Nephilim. So if the Alef-Tav that we see as the standalone is actually like this marker of the full scope of everything he had in mind, then for us to comprehend, to know, to grok, that I use that word G-R-O-K, it was coined by, forget the author's name, but a stranger in a strange land, to get something to such depth that you really are one with it. That's what we're supposed to be with the Alef-Tav. And if you know what that is, then the only way you can put it into words is the Alef-Tav. Or I would write it with the Hebrew letter Aleph is written kind of an upside down shape compared to the English letter A. There's the Aleph. And to say the Aleph is Taved, to extend that line and just say, bam, the Alef-Taved. So I use that, you might see that as a symbol on the Erectology font, and I made a little kind of a thing you can stick on your hat or an emblem, piece of like a little jewelry thing. You might say, the Alef-Tav is to say that plan is going to be accomplished, period. And for us to have that in our mind, make no mistake, there's no chance that his plan will not happen. So for us to have a stability of mind and heart is to realize he has a plan. And that when we hear the overlords pounding their chest and yelling and shouting like Goliath and a few other people throughout Scripture, their words mean nothing other than an agitation to him, but they'll only agitate him if we are one with and on board with his Alef-Tav, which means we need to listen to his voice, believe what he said, trust what he said, and do what he said. So if we are one with his Alef-Tav, and we'll elaborate with that with Psalms 81 here in just a moment, If we can be so grok achad with his Alef-Tav that we are with him, Yeshua said, I only say what I hear my Father saying. I only do what I see my Father doing. I'm not about my own agenda. Follow me. So we should be the same way. What I'm suggesting is the Alef-Tav is a statement, a symbol, a marker that says right here, we should be totally achad with the Alef-Tav. And for us to have never learned the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet means that our entire culture historically for how many centuries has been totally disadvantaged, in the dark, ignorant. Not that it's our fault, that's just the circumstances. But now that we're aware, thank you, YAHSHUAH, it's our task to get up to speed or to be as unified as possible. So how do you do that? Well, you got to look at the orthography of each letter and realize that it's a symbol. Not just Aleph means ox and Bet means house and Gimel means Campbell. Those are the symbols of the shape of the letter because that it carries something. So if you have a bag and something in it, and you can see what kind of shape or you can feel it, you can guess what's in the bag. If it's a box, it's harder to tell. So each letter is like this thing which is conforming to the shape of what's inside of it. So the shape of the letters do mean something. And you say, well, maybe the sound of the letter too, but that's a whole different thing. Stan Tenen with Miru was suggesting that the shape of the modern Hebrew letters had to do with the shape of the hands, whether they're this way or that way or this way, or that's a whole nother study, the gesture language, which seems to have very real credibility, but I'm not even addressing the gesture language. I'm talking about the orthography of the Hebrew letters. Okay, so all that is a setup to say, if we look at the Alef-Tav, even though you look on the internet and you cannot find this information, why aren't the rabbis talking about it? Doesn't matter why. But if you learn what each letter means, what the 22 letter sequence means, which includes what's between each letter. How does Aleph become Bet or Bet become Gimel? Or what does it mean become? Does it actually transition or transform or transmute? Or is there a passageway between Bet and Gimel and between Gimel and Dalet? And like the canyon, the Columbia River Gorge, how do you get from the desert to the Portland, Vancouver area? Well, through the canyon, but that doesn't mean the desert becomes this. Concepts. If you can wrap your mind around the concepts and the transitions between the staging of the 22 concepts, the more you understand, the more you get it, the more achad you are with the Alef-Tav, then every time you'll see that standalone Alef-Tav, you take that whole concept, that whole frame of mind, that whole frame of being, and you dump it right there. It's not just the signature of Jesus Christ, or it's not just the symbol that says, oh, that speaks of him. That's his secret identity hiding there. But it could be his mind, his ruach, which could be your mind, your ruach, in league, fit, compatibly achad with Elohim's ruach. I think that that's what that symbol is meaning, which then becomes a personal exercise to go back and say, if that's what it means, once you get up to speed with that, you then have to go back and every time you see that Alef-Tav plugged in scripture, which won't be in any English Bible other than Et Sefer or MATS, you have to plug in what you understand that to be in that location and let it affect how you're reading that verse. Okay, let's go on to Psalms 81. Now, the interesting thing about Psalms 81, my wife asked me to look at this some time ago and again the other day, because there's a phrase in here that says, blow the shofar at the new moon, at the full moon of your festival. So the question is, when is the new moon and when is the full moon? Are they two different events or are they both the same event? Is the beginning of the month that people call Rosh Chodesh, is that actually the full moon or is it the dark, the conjunction? Or is it the sighting of the first sliver? See, nobody knows. And, you know, people have asked, will we talk about the calendar? Not really, not right now. But this is one of the problems, because right here in Psalms 81 is one of the only places that makes it clear. But as soon as you look at it, you realize it's not clear at all. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But the point is, it does not tell you new moon and full moon. That's the way it's translated. But what does it really say? Okay, so here, let's go on to Psalms 81. First, and I'll try to go through this kind of quickly. I've got this written out, and you can take more time, but I want to get to a couple points. So it says, Lamed Mem Nun Zadi Het, Lamed Netzach, and the word Netzach is translated conductor, but if we talked before, this word shows up many times, and it means prestige, perpetual, enduring, brilliant, triumphant, conqueror. The notes are in the are available. So does it mean conductor, or this is concerning the triumphant, enduring, victorious? Yeah. This one word, Lamed, you could say wraps up the entire Alef-Tav. It wins. Yahweh has already planned and determined that the good guys win. The white hats beat the black hats, you could say, in one sense, to use a kind of a quintessential Western movie theme. They just do. Righteousness is victorious. In fact, the word Zadikah not only means righteousness, but it also means victory, deliverance, and salvation. Righteousness wins. I mentioned the story once before. I was at a bakery with some friends, and there's this guy with some devil pentagram tattoos, and I said to the kid, he was some 20-year-old something, and I said, hey, do people choose the losing side because they're stupid, or are they just ignorant? And he said, there are no sides. Really? You're sure about that? Here you are, dressing up and clinging to one side, who we have already been told by the Creator is the losing side, badly losing, painfully, terribly losing, and you choose to be part of that side. Why? Because you like their graphics? The good guys, do they have any graphics? Oh, rainbows and flowers and... No, they have the 22 letters of the Zavot. In fact, Yahweh calls himself Yahweh Zavot. Zadi Bet Alef-Tav. Zadi Bet Aleph is army, or hosts, or legions, or forces. But Alef-Tav, as we said, is a letter of the alphabet. And the word Zadi Bet, what does that mean? Well, it means turtle, something that swells up. But Nun Zadi Bet is to take a knife and stick it in something so the handle is sticking out. To stick something in so that it's there. Well, that's like the sureness of the meaning of every letter of the Alef-Tav, letters of the alphabet that are positioned and stable and enduring and perpetually, brilliantly, triumphantly conquerors. Lamanatsak, you might say, is a way of describing Yahweh's Alef-Tav. Every letter in its place, never moving, never compromised, absolute. But we don't know it. We don't see it. Anyway, El Hagatit, upon the guitar, you might say, La Asaph. Asaph, it means collection or anthology. So this is for the anthology or from the anthology. Either way, Ha Raninu, our running, ringing, shouting cry of joy. La Elohim, unto Elohim. Oznu, that's the word Oz, or like Mauzi, fortress, splendor, glory. The Resh Yod, Ayin, Vav. Well, Resh Yod, Ayin, if you look at Resh Ayin, Resh Vav Ayin, like Teruah, like Yom Teruah, it's a war cry. Noise, shout, but it also means think and ponder. Resh Ayin also means friend, companion, but also evil, harm. So what is this saying? Well, it's basically a war cry because there are those who associate with us that intend evil upon us. Lamed Aleph, Lamed Hey Yod. Well, El-He, my God, my El-He, my power, but it means to empower Jacob, Yaakov, Yod Ayin Kuf Bet. But Ayin Kuf Bet, the word Yod Ayin Kuf Bet, Jacob, also means the letter Kuf is to be sent off, come around a circuit, and come on back. So for YAHSHUAH, now that's appropriating the Mishkan pattern, looking at the narrative story of the alphabet, the letter Kuf is after Zadi and before the letter Resh. So for YAHSHUAH to come out of the grave Zadi, to ascend up into the sky, the letter Kuf is, remember, the round circle with a vertical line, our letter Q. So he rose up into the clouds. There's the vertical ascent into the round, the clouds. It's a picture. And then the Melech, the angel, said to the disciples, he's coming back the same way. In the future, he's going to gather his forces, that's the round thing up in the sky, and come back and land right here at the same spot. The inverse of the letter Kuf. So the letter Kuf is this prophecy, a projection that he who ascended will gather his Zavot, forces of the heavens, and come right back here just like he said. When did he say he was going to do that? In the alphabet. And Yaakov, Yod Ayin Kuf Bet, is the ayin to comprehend that that event, Bet, is the substance of reality. That's the word Jacob. He will certainly make it real, solid, not just a plan. It will happen. That's another way to read the word Jacob. Verse 3, lift up Zimmer, which is singing ve tano tap. Well, tav nun vav, if you look it up in the dictionary, tav nun hey means to teach. It's also the word for jackal or to have teeth. It also, natan means to give a gift. So to give this teaching teeth, and then the word tap, tav pei, like it's a word for drum, tapping. It's a sound. So the sound of the word is the same, but it also pays a mouth. So here you have the sign of the covenant, tav, and a mouth giving teeth to the teaching. Kanor, that's the word harp. But kaf nun vav resh, well, nun vav resh, like menorah, means light. Kaf is like. So here's this harp, which translated, but like light. Give teeth to the teaching like light in the darkness. Naim, nun ayin yod mem. Well, shevet gam yachad, hine matov, hine matov. Uma naim. Remember that song? How good and pleasant it is. This is pleasant and delightful for brethren to dwell together in unity. People with kinsman Nabal. Well, that's the word Nabal that we mentioned. It means foolish, but also it's another musical instrument. So how pleasant and delightful, like light, giving teeth to the mouth of the covenant when we lift up in singing. So here, yeah, but did David write this, Psalms 81? Does he have any idea what these jerks are claiming that they're going to do to our economy and our country and what they're doing in New Zealand and Australia and Canada right now? It doesn't matter what they say. For us to have ringing cry, the fortress of our splendor is to have a war cry thinking about Yahweh's promise to us to have a future, though they are trying to deny us a present. This is a war. This is a battle cry. Though it seems senseless, Nabal, we seem to be foolish people, Nabal, this is Kanor Naim, for us to have this Alef-Tav within us. But if you don't know what it means, this is all just rhetoric. Verse 4, Takia, Tav Kuf Yodayim, but this is Tav Kuf Ayin Vav. It's the same word. It means noise, squawk, chirp, screech. It's a blast of the shofar. The next word is shofar, but the word shofar is not just the horn that you blow, but it's also this ornamentation, like it's ornamenting various animals with these horns and antlers. And then here's this word, bet kaf samik hay. Excuse me, I missed a word here. Takia bet chet dalet shin. On the Kadesh. Well, the word Kadesh there means renewal or restoration. And then there's the word shofar. So it said, give a blast on the shofar at the renewal. Is that the new moon? It doesn't say the word moon. The word Jericho, Yerach, Yod Resh Het, that's the word moon. So I think Jericho was built as a round city like the full moon, like a beehive. 4 minutes. And then here's the word shofar, and then words bet, kaf, samik, hay. Well, kaf, samik, hay means covered, overlaid, thrown. But kaf means like. Samik is kind of that menorah shape, like a tree, like the mast and yard arms of a ship. And hay is to express. So you could say, is that the full moon? Is that the dark moon? La yom chagnu. Chag is festival, ceremonial day. Blow the shofar at the new moon, at the full moon. Doesn't say new moon and full moon. It says at the renewal, and the shofar at this engineered structure revealing the day of our Chag, festival, ceremony. Well, you could say Yom Teruah is supposed to be blowing of trumpets or making a shout or a noise on the first day of the 7th month, which would be in the autumn. The word September, sept is Latin for 7, October 8, though it's in our calendar, it's the 9th and 10th month. So, but you go back, you look at these words and you realize whatever this is, he's saying for him to allow us to be restored the throne has something to do with our festivals, and that we should be blowing this shofar. There's something about the restoration of his kingdom, of Yahuwah being on the throne, coming back to his language, his customs, the Shabbat, the Moedim. I believe this is talking about this occasion, and whether or not this has anything to do with the moon or the shape of the moon or the light of the moon is a secondary matter. We should be rejoicing with a ringing cry and a shout of joy, a war cry of shofars, because this occasion is right now. We ought to be celebrating this. So we're going to set up for verse 5 in a moment. This is the end of part 1.